Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Entry Level Left. If you value the content we create and want access to exclusive bonus episodes, please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/entrylevelleft, which is one word. We also post memes, news, and current events on our Facebook page at Entry Level Left. And the link tree in our About section of our Facebook page has links to every platform that you can find us on. You can also find us on Twitter at Entry Level Left. Without further ado, we'll be talking tonight about college and university institutions under capitalism.
So without further ado, who here has gone to college, and what was your overall opinion or experience with it?
I have, in fact, done a college in the past. I'd say it's pretty mixed. I'd say it opened up my perspective on a lot of things. I chose a sociology major, which sort of, kind of opened my eyes to the way the world works and shit. I'd say overall it's a positive experience because it did give me that full paradigm shift. But like overall, it's sort of like a useless paper that's sitting on my wall. It seems like it never really taught me anything in terms of like learning career stuff.
Right.
So, I mean, it's probably good in the long run because it did open my mind, and it's probably good because it definitely gave me a credential. Like, I definitely don't feel sort of like insecure about it when I apply for jobs because I'm like, hey, I have that BA. If that's what they're looking for, it's there. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think like a lot of people sit somewhere on like a spectrum of like having a useless degree like me and just being sort of happy it's there but never really using it. Or they sort of have like some like really lifeless STEM Lord degree, and they might still never use it, just depending on what they did with life, and they probably spent a lot of time and money getting a degree that may or may not be useful or interesting to them anymore.
Yeah.
But I think overall, it for most people, especially for the more privileged you are, I think the college experience opens up a lot of doors, and the more money you have, the easier it is to open those doors.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I had, of course, like a similar experience with college. I went for my 4-year and then a 2-year master's. Undergraduate experience, wildly different than my graduate experience. I mean, I got a degree that in my undergrad that I don't really use at all, but overall, I mean, it was positive, because for me, like, I learned a shit ton about the world. Not even, I wouldn't even say so much from college. It was more so like, or like what I was learning in my classes. It was more so like how the classes taught me to kind of teach myself, basically, like, and how to just interpret a lot of different, shit. And it also, because of various means, it wasn't very expensive for me. So yeah, I mean, for me, it was good. It wasn't until I got into grad school and saw the politics behind it, with the university professors and the conferences and the more just graduate level navel gazing shit, that's when I began to look, I think, at university education a lot differently. And then also just hearing experiences from friends who I was in school with at the time and them struggling to find work with these degrees, even though they went for degrees that were, supposedly market valuable, it just kind of opened my eyes a lot, I think, about how colleges actually work for people and what the institution itself is under capitalism.
Yeah. So I would say my experience is a little bit different from y'all's. I left the house when I was 19 with $700. So I didn't really have a lot of stability and security. And I was couch surfing for several years. But I managed to bike to a community college and get a 2-year degree. It took me 4 years because I had to work pretty much part-time to full-time the entire time just to make ends meet and support myself. So I'm a little bit disaffected by my college experience just because, even though I was lucky enough to get through without really any debt because of Pell Grant and different things like that, it still took a toll on me mentally, just having to deal with all the bureaucracy of the college experience And I'm one of those people who kind of just went to college because I felt like that was the marketable thing to do. Of course, like I had my dreams and aspirations to become, you know, an academic when I was younger, but I just didn't really feel like I had the stability and security to do so. So, I mean, my college experience is, I don't consider it over, because I do want to go back to school at some point and finish. I'm about like almost 80 credits in to a bachelor's degree. So I do want to go back. But I have an associate's degree, and then I hold engineering and IT certifications that kind of put me as someone with like 5-6 years experience plus the associate's degree. So, you know, my experience was not typical, but it's really panned out for me in a lot of ways. The field that I chose to kind of go into is very marketable, and so it's been mostly lucrative, and I've been kind of blessed to have that aspect. But my college experience was very different from y'all's, I think. Like I did not go to a campus. Like I didn't have a typical commute. Like I rode a bicycle like between home and school about 10-15 miles, maybe like 3-4 times a week for 2 or 3 years. So I'm that boomer over here screaming at the cloud saying, I used to go to school in the snow uphill 15
Right.
miles both ways. But
Grandpa Simpson over
yeah,
here.
yeah, my experience was not typical. It's also not over. So I don't know. Overall, I just feel like kind of like Nathan. It's a piece of paper. I mean, it's more up to the individual. I feel like in my experience being a hiring manager at some points in my career, like I'm more likely to hire someone with a little bit of like real business applicable experience and that shows a willingness to learn over someone with a 4-year degree or, you know, or higher, because I've worked with people in my industry, in my field, that have bachelor's degree and they're fresh out of college and they literally don't know anything. Like you put them in the job and they don't know how to apply any of the knowledge that they have because, you know, IT is one of those things like it's, you know, they teach it very theoretically, but, you know, when you get into the business side, like if you don't have actual experience, like that shows. So my field's probably different from y'all's. So
Well, no, actually, that's pretty much like a universal standard. Like any profession you go into, they always say, yeah, you learned all this great, awesome shit in school, but like this, now you're going to learn how it actually works. And they tend to have the same. They tend to have the same feeling that like they'd rather have someone with this experience and willingness to learn than necessarily having like, you know, a bachelor's or a master's. But I would actually say that what you described, Matt, like your experiences, I actually think that that's the case for a lot of people now. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they have to go, they feel a need that they have to go to college to like get some sort of means and stability in their life, but they don't have either the scholarships available or parents who can help them or whatever the case may be. And so they have to work basically, you know, full time while also being a student, and it causes a lot of like frustrations and all that stuff. And then on top of that, they come out with this degree, but the entire time they were working for that degree, they were working this, let's say, like retail job or fast food job or like, you know, grocery store job. And they weren't, and that is what financed their education. And they didn't have the time to spend or the availability or the you know means whatever to spend that time instead at an internship, right? Getting this direct hands-on experience doing X, Y, and Z. And that is where you really see kind of these universities not only like exploding in terms of tuition costs and making it harder and harder for people to, you know, be students, but also not provide any help or means for these students to then get employed with the degrees that they got.
yeah, I think the thing that's specific to like US, like capitalist society and just America overall is this this mythology of the American dream. Like millennials, especially our generation, it's been blasted into our head from birth to basically go to school, go to college, or you're going to just flip burgers forever. Like
Yeah,
that was literally
definitely.
something that was said to me growing up by teachers, by, not my parents wouldn't say that stuff to me, but like people that knew my parents, or just like people in general would say that type of stuff. And it's so culturally ingrained at this point that you should go to college to make more money over the course of your lifetime. And they've done various studies about it too. I think like people with a bachelor's degree are more likely to earn like a certain amount of money more than someone with just a high school diploma over the course of their life. And so really a lot of the American dream mythology is centered around this concept. And college and universities in our society, really what they amount to is that they're institutions that are involved in the cultural, the technological, the knowledge production. And all of these things can be considered capital, like knowledge production, technological skills, cultural, the gating of cultural experiences through college. All of those things can be considered like a social capital, right? All of those things come to fruition through the education and training of individuals. And in our society, it's kind of seen as a rite of passage as well. Like if we think about like fraternities and different programs in colleges and universities that were sort of funneled through and expected to do, or these expectations that are culturally heaped upon us, it creates this mythology that is kind of self-reinforcing and self-perpetuating.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely plays into how expensive colleges become as well, because this demand for this product is so fucking high, you know? And I'd consider colleges to be like one of the first OG lifestyle marketers overall. Like on one hand, there's like a billion movies about how awesome frat life is. Wasn't there like a TV show or something, Greek or something, for a while and stuff like that?
Yeah.
There's all this like media culture around how awesome it is. And there's also like a billion TV shows that glorify like really high level jobs, you know, like Bones with forensic anthropology,
Right.
or like all these fucking Hannibal with like clinical psychology or whatever. Like there's all these shows that glorify these like professional level jobs
NCIS,
which require college.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, they're all, and so people start Googling like, oh, how do I become a fucking FBI profiler or whatever, you know? And it's like all these things in a weird way point to college. I don't know if it's on purpose, but there's definitely this sort of culture where it's like to be interesting or to be like a real worker, like a real like useful person, that you have to go to college, which is, you know, it's just sort of strange. It's sort of like self-fulfilling in a way.
Well, there's two things to that actually, and I'm at one of them. I'm just like literally now thinking of as we're recording this, but it's the fact that it's like one of the reasons why I think that college was pushed so heavily onto our generation specifically is because realistically, like that was a newer thing. I mean, I think people have always valued college and going to college, but I think a push to send an entire generation to college was kind of a new thing in American history. You don't really see that as much in like the 60s and 70s, even though there were obviously a lot of people on college campuses. They've exploded, you know, over the years. And there's, as you said, a market demand for it. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, you know, before all of the, like before, like in the 60s and 70s, for instance, if you didn't want to go to college, you could call your uncle who was a plumber or an electrician, and he would get you a job doing that, and it paid very well. And this is actually a right-wing talking point that a lot of right-wingers will say, like, oh, we need more people to go into these trades, neglecting the fact that the reasons why those trades were so lucrative is because they were unionized. And when the unions were abolished and those jobs became less and less sort of pay-wise on the totem pole and harder to get a foothold into, then enters this, well, the next alternative is all of you need to go to college and get educations, because it's either you need to enter the managerial class or you need to, as Matt said, flip fucking burgers. You know, there's really no alternative to that. So the public university in that sense has become this a reaction to the onslaught of neoliberalism from the 80s and what started in the 80s. And then, the next point to that is the fact that at the same time that that's happened, that same mantra of neoliberalism and what happened in the 80s went after universities because, they're radical, blah, 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 blah. And they started cutting their funding. And so if the university's funding is cut, then the only means for them to generate more revenue is by raising tuition. And so now your tuition's more expensive. And then you get university leaders who come from the corporate world who then know how to efficiently run the university like a corporation, And to many extents, the universities have always kind of done that, but it's obviously exploded even more so.
Yeah.
And so, now it's less about the education and it's more so about branding and marketing the university a certain way. And, even though that's the case, your tuition is still going through the roof. And there's really nothing tangible to show for it the way there was maybe back in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, to speak to that, there is like a large amount of like sort of, again, lifestyle marketing done on campus to sort of sell you the college experience. You know what I mean? There's like all the little frills that a university has, whether it's like sports teams or stadiums. A lot of the concerts in our area end up at the university, and they definitely do that on purpose to try to keep it like active and shit.
Of course.
A bunch of rec activities, and they always have like newer and bigger facilities. I was actually really interested to learn that like in other countries, like in Europe and stuff, like a lot of their colleges don't even have libraries. They just use like the public library and stuff.
Right.
Like a lot of them are like extremely small buildings, no frills at all. So when it comes to the cost of college, that's the other thing that you really have to consider is like how much is pumped into American colleges to make them the sort of like aspirational lifestyle that they're trying to sell to, fucking 18-year-old kids who like literally are 7 years shy of having a fully developed brain. So
right.
It's just kind of heinous,
Well, yeah, and even too with the explosion of this like marketing scheme, which is essentially what colleges have become, you in turn have the explosion of administration, to run these facilities and run these programs, and enters a whole nother level of almost like a corporate bureaucracy, but in like a quote unquote public sector position within a public, quote unquote, public university, that effectively has become a hub of corporate money and corporate, expansionism. And like you were just saying with the, they're investing all this money in stadiums and, high level facilities. And of course they are, because one, that's going to attract new students. And two, I don't know if you all know this, but if you take something like US News and World Report, which is like what is used to like rank colleges in the United States, who's number 1, 2, and 3, the algorithm that actually feeds that thing is based on, well, the hypothesis, or not even the hypothesis, but the thesis statement rather, that Yale, Harvard, Princeton et al. Are the number 1 universities in the United States. And so they build an algorithm that basically is always going to spit them out at the top. And so in order for universities to up their ranking in US News and World Report, there's so many things that have to go into that, one of which is name recognition. And how do you get name recognition in the United States as a university? A football team, high-level athletics, nice facilities, a place that people want to be, and a location that people want to be. Those all contribute literally in one sense, and by one of the most highest standard rankings of universities in the United States, to that ranking. So here you have this like cross embedding of, this corporate mindset and methodology, again, being employed on university campuses, and in turn raising tuition costs and making it so that people like in Matt's position, like he was talking about earlier, it's fucking miserable,
I think you were onto something when you were talking about sort of the main budget bloat being like administrative bureaucracy. Similar to what we've talked about in private companies in past episodes, each department in a college is pretty much obsessed with proving that they're worth something.
Right.
And so they're always pushing out papers, or they're taking on new students, yada, yada, yada. But at the same time, like the individual actors in that that department are, I mean, I don't want to say useless, but a lot of times they are not trying their hardest with many things.
Right.
There's a lot of minimal effort jobs that end up on a campus like that, just like at any company, and so just like on, with private companies, you get the same problem of kind of like a free rider problem, or kind of like a bureaucracy problem where everybody's somehow doing everything but also doing nothing at the same time.
Exactly. And then, on that note, that's how many of these colleges, at the same time that you have this administrative bloat and you have, some people who are kind of like not doing a whole lot. On the other hand, the colleges have become even more exploitative and demanding of other elements on the campus, namely your students and faculty, right? Because now this explosion of administration are, you have people who are, their main focus is processing grants for these different departments. And there's this competition to get more grants and to be at the top of the food chain at your university so you can secure more funding so that your programs don't get cut. And in order to do that, you have universities that consider themselves like tier 1 research universities, like the one that I went to, that force their faculty to bump out numerous papers, every single year to secure more grants, which the university takes half of all incoming grants or more. It's a money driver for them. And then on top of that, you have your students who work under these professors who are worked to the bone to just keep this engine of income just spiraling into the university and basically paying people, paying for people to continue to have jobs that are not actually doing the research.
I kind of like, from what we were talking about before, I look at college and university as sort of a class magnifier.
For sure.
For example, like the differences in the social safety net, like I talked about, familial wealth or intergenerational wealth, and even individual privilege, like, even down to the micro stuff, like having both of your parents involved in your life, and having a safe, stable home and an emotionally stable home. Those are privileges that not everybody has. And when you don't have those things, it creates, lifetime issues, maladjusted coping strategies, all types of psychological and psychosocial issues. And thus begins like the social stratification that capitalism thrives on. The social competition we're talking about with, competing for, who's going to Florida State or who's going to UF, or all these different colleges competing with each other for the attention and the cultural approval of students and the market and things like that. That's all social competition. And it's induced by this American dream mythology that we were talking about earlier, which again fuels that student loan industry for people like me who couldn't necessarily afford to go to college. I just didn't take any loans, but there are a lot of people out there who just go, well, I want to do this and I need a loan to do it. So the loan servicing industry and the student loan industry is right there to take your hand and help you with that. And then debt is used as leverage to integrate young people into the embedded hierarchies of capitalism through this, again, this debt servitude and this American dream, this cultural mythology that really just keeps the motor running. And I see it as like a pre-corporate society. Like it's the incubating tube or the incubator for corporate society that students more and more are being adapted into a corporate world when they're on campus. They're being fed all of these different things and programs and being hunted by, Fortune 500 companies and the military and all these types of things. It's the central hub of recruitment and molding and conditioning for young people in our society.
I think it's so interesting because debt is like sort of one of the things that keeps people working in a funny way. Like you and I really can't take a $12 an hour job teaching people how to like raft on a river in Idaho because we have debt. You know what I mean? We don't have that privilege of walking away from everything. And what's so weird to me is just that like at 18 years old, it's like, hey, are you going to take on all this debt? And by the way, this debt is going to come with a lifetime of you having to pay it back. Even if you get a decent job, it's still going to take you a long time to pay it back. It's weird because it's like, I'm not going to say it's like indentured servitude or anything, but it sort of feels like it because it's like you don't have a specific master that you're working under or anything like that. But in a weird way, it's like you're sort of just owed to the system. You're like, well, I got to come up with 30 grand in the next 10 years probably. How do I do this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And by the time you're done with that, you're probably trying to save up for retirement. So it's like your whole life, you're sort of stuck in this rat race of saving funds or saving funds to pay off debt and then saving funds to, I guess, die or whatever. You know?
And that's what I mean by the embedded hierarchy of capitalism. So they get you into that debt servitude. And then what that does to your life is it means that you've got to, settle down. And maybe I should get a mortgage because I want to get equity. I mean, I'm here anyway. I might as well, get equity. And then bam, bam, bam. And you're in so deep now, you're embedded in it that now you become part of the system and the status quo. And it sounds kind of like radical to say, well, duh, like, why wouldn't I just get a mortgage? Why wouldn't I just settle down for 5 years and work at this job to pay this off? But realistically, what that does is, like, if you look at that society, that type of society that they're in, like, is that a free society? Like, is that a truly free society when you are so, like, saddled by debt by just going to school to be educated for the things that you are passionate about or that you care about? Like, I don't know, like, is that, to me, that doesn't seem like a free society. So that's why I'm kind of like avoidant to go and take out loans. But again, this is the embedded hierarchy that they get you to buy in. And I don't know if y'all heard the classic phrase, like, I didn't sell out, I bought in. That kind of comes into play here with, capitalism. And it starts in that university environment. Like I said, it's an incubator for getting people hooked up with an IV drip into the system.
Well, some of that, it's like, I definitely see what you're saying. It's not even that people are coming out of these colleges like, oh, well, I'm here and I might as well get equity. It's like they're coming out of colleges and they can't even get a fucking home loan because they're $120,000 in debt to a university. You know what I mean? Like, doing what they were told they have to do in order to, quote unquote, not flip burgers. And it shackles people into particular positions or jobs or types of work that they don't necessarily want to do, but they have to in order to, chase the money to keep their head above water because of the loans that they took out. I mean, you have people who, for instance, in my field, who wanted to not their whole lives, but, at some point in their life decided, hey, I want to go into planning or just government in general. And I want to do, good in society or something like that. And then they go to this elite school that they're told to go to get this job. But then they get out and they realize, oh, wait, I can't work in the public sector. I have to work in the private sector and work 70 fucking hour weeks because I took out $90,000 in student loan debt, to go get this education. So, I mean, there's so many factors at play, but at the end of the day, I think it begs the question, have these public colleges, quote unquote, public colleges become for profit? Have they become a for-profit enterprise of capitalism?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say yes. Like it's to this point where it's like, for me at least, that the market drive and the market offering and the cultural apparatus of it all are so integrated with each other that, it's clear to me that we could choose to arrange society in a different way. We could choose to have the university and college be an experience where a young person goes and they learn what they want to learn and they decide how they want to fit into society. But under capitalism, by virtue of the system, the market is dictating the need. You know what I'm saying? Like, the market is dictating your dreams to you. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But I definitely think it's become a for-profit enterprise because I think anything under capitalism really ultimately turns into just another market opportunity to expand culturally, to expand into a way to offer people products. And we've talked on previous episodes, like always be creating new markets. That's the methodology of capitalism and neoliberalism, especially, is like, let's create an infrastructure for this product so that we can market it to such and such demographic. Like, that's been the case for since time immemorial with capitalism. And the way that I see it culturally is just like, there's no way to tell when the market ends and the culture of the market incentive begins. Like, for example, it becomes like sort of a gray area. Like, are we going to college because we truly want to learn and be passionate about certain things to integrate into society? Or are we going to school to just be more profitable and to be able to sell ourselves more? And I think the more and more I look at our society, like, sure, you have some people that still go into college to do things that matter to them, that they're passionate about. But I think more and more that's becoming an immense privilege to be able to go to college and just decide that you want to pursue an art history degree for 4 years, or you want to go and get a psychology, like a bachelor's in psychology, like, which is not really marketable right now. Like, you couldn't go and make maybe more than $15 an hour unless you had incredible connections with just a bachelor's in psychology. Or you'd have to be very specialized. And even for like biology too, like, you could go into medical coding or you could go into some certain things, but the outlook for a lot of those degrees is just like, okay, you either need grad school or you're just not you're not like competitive. And so that's another component of it too. It's like, when you introduce the competitive nature of society and how that impacts and puts pressures, like systemic pressures, on the educational system, I really think that there's no way to excise the profit motive from the current system. So I do honestly think that public colleges and universities, they are for profit, because you really can't, I don't think you can excise or remove those elements from the entire experience.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, Matt. I mean, that's exactly how I view it. I just remember back, when I was in high school and seeing on the news these stories about these people, predominantly like poor people, getting scammed by, your DeVry universities, your Phoenix universities, your Everest universities, that were essentially, preying on poor people who, maybe couldn't get into a university or something like that, or not even so much that, just wanted an education, and was kind of selling them these junk degrees and, like, I don't know, managerial marketing or some bullshit, and telling them, oh, you're going to be so competitive and blah, blah, blah. Give us, 40 to 60 to 100 and something $1,000, and we'll give you this degree, this bachelor's, this master's, this PhD. And they were obviously selling them junk bullshit that couldn't be used anywhere. And, people would just like laugh at them, be like, how stupid could these people be for like falling for this? Or they would laugh at those institutions like, oh, haha, you're going to go to DeVry when you graduate because you're so stupid or something like that. But the reality is those fucking schools were the model. They were the model, they were like not the
Phoenix
exception.
And DeVry and even like Everest University, where it's like, you're sitting on your couch, your life's passing you by. When are you going to enroll in Everest University?
Right. Or ITT Tech or any of them. Like, they were preying on people, but like at the end of the day, people can laugh and joke and say that these people deserved it all they want. It's like, no, that was the model. That's what the modern university system is. I mean, you go on to any major institution across the United States, including your Stanfords and NYUs and Berkeleys and all that stuff, and they are sure as shit offering, an online master's that can be done in 1 year and, computer information management. You know what I mean? And it's like, and you don't even have to know how to code or do blah, 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 or whatever. And it's like, obviously this is a scam. This university is going to get $80,000 off whatever, chump signs up for this, but it's the model. It's the norm. There's no difference between that and DeVry other than the logo that's stamped on the degree you get at the end of the day.
And not only is sort of like the core part of college, like the curriculum and the schooling itself becoming for profit, but there's also a bunch of little predators sitting on the outsides of it who are like waiting to pick on the students. And one way that I really saw it when I was on campus, for example, was all the little businesses that seem to sort of have their fingers in colleges. I mean, everything from like when you get to school, you got to get an account with Oasis or Blackboard or Canvas or whatever. All these giant companies who are licensing out $1 million products to like, public or what's supposed to be a public education. You know what I mean? You got like, for example, on USF, there's Aramark. So you have like a designated catering company that every single department has to use. You have restaurant franchises and vendors and exclusive contracts for like which products can be sold on campus, like Nike or fucking, I don't know, Puma or whatever the fuck brands are out there, Adidas or whatever. You have like the like 4 different companies who print all the textbooks, and they all cost like $450 if you want to buy them, and they're required for your classes. You have like testing materials that are copyrighted, so like Scantron or like Pearson VUE or whatever, who like essentially own all the standardized testing and things like that. And you have even test prep materials that are sold by these same companies usually, who are preparing you for the tests that they made up. There's like all these different little ways that the private industry has like dipped its little greasy fingers into college just to make an extra buck.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they're all over campus. They're who funds like pretty much half of university operations, in and outside of the actual education you're getting yourself. And, on top of that too, it's like, it even goes beyond that. Like, I just remember, I think I brought it up on a previous episode about like the business school or kids from the business school at the university I went to teaming up with the computer science majors to basically develop a program. And the whole goal of the entire project was to sell this, to be the winning team or the team that gets picked by Google or Amazon or Apple to, sell their app to. And so immediately you see, and of course it was all sponsored by these groups, but it's like immediately you see like, oh, we're computer science and business majors, and we're not going to take the skill set that we just learned in the university to create a, not necessarily a public utility, but even just a utility in the form of an app that can be used by people for, and we develop that and it's ours. Our goal is to develop something and sell it to these big giant corporations and make our quick buck and dip out, make our money and move. And that's sort of the like ethos that is being pumped into these kids on campuses in all departments and all across all fields. It's just one example. But it happens on a daily basis, on universities. You have entire schools, departments on university campuses named after corporations or figureheads from different corporations who donate X amount of dollars to the university. I mean, the list goes on and on and on,
Most of the time you'll see like a university will have its own hospital campus. You know what I mean?
Oh,
you
yeah.
can only imagine how many funds, how much revenue is being pulled through a fucking hospital on campus.
Exactly. And it's not even just, it doesn't even have to be like private sector entities in the way that we traditionally think of them, or even government entities in the way that we traditionally think of them. Another massive presence on these campuses that definitely preys on student loan debt, or students with a lot of student loan debt, is the military or private military contractors. I mean, the university that I went to is like the 20th most militarized campus in the country, according to like Vice or something. I mean, we had like US CENTCOM and SOCOM like on our campus doing research on to fund, weapons and intelligence. And they're in everything from computer science to political science to, geographic information systems and all this different stuff. And they go up to these kids and they say, hey, you're really smart. You're really brilliant. We also see you have a lot of debt. Sign this contract, come work for us for 4 years. We'll pay off your debt. And, you'll get to quote unquote, serve your country or whatever the case may be, And it's basically a contract saying, we're going to give you a security clearance. You're going to build bombs that nobody knows about that are going to be used in God knows what and God knows where. And if you talk about it, we'll throw you into a prison where you break rocks all day for the rest of your life, you know, or sue the shit out of you, or you can't get out of it. You're locked in for 4 years. You know, that's just how they operate.
And this goes back to sort of something I was talking about earlier, where it's hard to separate where like the market forces and the knowledge production society begins. Like, for example, recently saw that Elon Musk, of all people, donated, I think it was like $5 million to Khan Academy, which,
Oh yeah,
for people that aren't aware, is basically just like, it's sort of like a tutoring website. It's got videos and instructional information, and also just like educational information and supplementary information for, you know, students and people who are trying to take SATs and just develop their learning profile, so to speak. So this is another reason why I feel like it's hard to separate market forces from knowledge production, and also from just, you know, higher learning in our society. And so that creates cultural problems, like, you know, where people start to see themselves as products, and we start to establish this culture, this very corporate culture of like, people are seemingly no longer really going to college expressly for the love of learning as they used to in like a classical sense. It's now just for the sole purpose of making more money over the course of your life. And it's been so embedded into the psyche of millennials and previous generations through this mythology of the American dream and so on, that again, like, it's really hard to see where the market forces end and then where the knowledge production begins. So one thing that I think is really highlighted with, you know, the presence of these entities like intergovernmental, like private sector entities like Google or the military or Amazon, or all of these companies that are becoming so embedded in the state apparatus and the spying apparatus and the security apparatus that we have. This idea of like institutionalization of knowledge, it really limits the accessibility on a wide scale. So I think it can only be, you know, deduced that society is, under capitalism, is trying to stratify these things and make them so competitive that it almost stratifies society with it. And that's why more and more I feel like college and university is becoming something of like of a privilege to participate in. So with that said, I would ask you guys, how has university education under capitalism really just like coerced people into compliance with market forces instead of following their passions, like, you know, we're taught in the classical sense of going to college?
well, I think to a degree, I mean, there's always been, it's not even to a degree, it's a fact. There's always been, like, the university has always been associated with privilege and a particular class standing. I just think in now, you know, it's not even recognizable anymore compared to what it used to be. You know, it used to be you basically get a degree in whatever the fuck you want, and you'll either get a job in that field doing that, or you won't necessarily get a job in that field, but you'll still get a high paying job regardless, you know, strictly because of the fact that you hold a degree in X, Y, or Z. But now that's just not the case. You have to get an extremely specialized degree that is firmly in line with current market forces and what is in market demand. And you really better hope that it's the right choice and you don't waste too much time studying it, because if you do, you're going to waste money. And you better hope that you love that career that you go into, because when you're in there, there's no, again, with how specialized it is, there's no getting out of it. You're stuck. If you go to school for engineering, you're going to be an engineer. You go to school for planning, you're going to be a planner. You go to school for psychology or X, Y, and Z, like that's what you're going to be. forever, basically. I mean, not necessarily, there's obviously exceptions, but you're much more locked into these rigid market forces. And if say someone wanted to go and pursue something else, they had some other great passion that isn't necessarily on that spectrum of market profitability. I mean, obviously you're not inhibited to still go out and study that or pursue that, but you are not going to find high paying or probably not even meaningful work, or work that you would consider meaningful based on what you went to school for. And you're probably going to be broke as shit because of it, because college is expensive for the vast majority of people. You either take out a loan, or you have rich parents, or you've got lucky and got a scholarship somehow.
Right. And this is the thing with like socialism versus capitalism. It's like, we have said numerous times on the show, like, we don't ultimately know what a socialism would look like in the US, what a socialism internationally would look like, or what principles it would necessarily stand by, or how it would look on an infrastructural level. But one thing about capitalism is that, say you have a bachelor's degree, right, in psychology, or just something that is like maybe a hard science, but it's more necessary for you to have a graduate degree to really utilize it to the fullest extent. Say you have a degree like that, you're having trouble finding work. You may take like a call center position, or you may take like a fast food position, or you may become a hostess or a server or something like that just to make ends meet. Those type of businesses may see that bachelor's degree and be like, oh, okay, like, well, why are you working here? You know what I mean? Or, you're going to just leave when you figure out your next step anyway. So it's like the competition under capitalism is so acute that those degrees won't necessarily make you more money unless you're in the right place with the right connections. And therein lies the meritocracy underlying everything. Therein lies the bureaucracy and the nepotism, or the propensity towards nepotism, in the sense that, like, y'all have all heard the phrase, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I think that's very, very poignant under capitalism, because, many jobs that I've gotten and like been privileged to have in my career history, I didn't get them because I was just the best candidate for the job. I got them because I made good relationships with people and connected with people. And I don't see that there's anything wrong with that, or that wouldn't be the way things would, work under socialism. But it is a very specific market type context with very specific type of social relations involved there. So, I mean, underlying all of these things is a very clear, like, class imperative, in my opinion.
Well, I think you put it sort of interesting yesterday when we were talking about it. It's almost like there's like a filter that you have to put on when, like, you ask, what do you want to do with life? There's like an automatic filter of like, well, what's acceptable for making money? You know what I mean? Like, most people take that question and they think in terms of careers that are going to sustain them, not in terms of careers that are going to fulfill them, which I think is such a sort of weird market psychology type of thing, do an effect on the way we even conceptualize what we want to do in life.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Ultimately, I'm glad that you brought that up. What I mentioned the other day was the market under capitalism. It creates a sense of, or a sort of Overton window, quote unquote, or realm of acceptable thought on pursuing your dreams and aspirations, because ultimately people, not everybody, of course, but if you're underprivileged or you need money, you're worried about your retirement, you're worried about your security later on in life, which are valid fears that a lot of people, especially millennials, like people, now get into their 30s, 40s, those are valid fears. So capitalism ultimately conditions your dreams and aspirations toward most profitable careers sometimes. And then from that too, you have to look back at the market forces and say, am I doing really what I want, or am I just being conditioned towards it in this like larger web of acceptable thought or acceptable career paths under capitalism? And So one thing back to the socialism versus capitalism thing is, you know, obviously if we live in a modern society, there are going to be needs that are dictated out. We're going to need so many engineers. We're going to need so many city planners. We're going to need so many, so on and so forth, right? Under capitalism, it's kind of like an anarchy of the market. And we have this cultural production of the American dream mythology that says, oh, you want to be president? You can do whatever you want. You want to be an astronaut? You can do that. You want to you want to become a scientist? Go ahead and do that. And then you're kind of left up to your own devices to go and pursue those things. And ultimately, there's no real oversight on like how many of these types of people are we producing? Like how many marketing majors do we actually need in society? Like how many psychology majors do we actually need in society? You know what I mean? And so there's no like really keyed in process. And so what that ultimately creates too is like a mass inefficiencies in the production of knowledge. Because ultimately at the end of the day, that's what universities and colleges are on a systemic level. They are producing knowledge and producing skilled, labor for the purposes of society. And so under capitalism, you don't have any coherence to that. Like they'll just allow anyone to take out a loan and go become a psychologist or get a bachelor's degree in psychology. And again, I'm not saying that this shouldn't be this way, but it just recognize that it creates some like tons of inefficiencies. Like if we take, for example, the large push or the large push in recent years towards STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, mathematics. All those career paths are being pushed in the market. And the STEM needs in the market are influencing advertising, knowledge production, solicitation of university programs to produce that skilled labor for the market. So the market needs limit the degree of freedom, actually, which people can choose to pursue their passions to a degree. Capitalism ends up rewarding mainly those degrees that produce the most amount of money or social or direct value. So when you say that capitalism makes you more free, I don't know that that's always true, especially in the case of the university system.
Absolutely. So I guess that begs the question, is college worth it as it currently stands?
Well, I mean, if you go by the numbers, I completely understand the pull towards it. I think Matt kind of referenced it earlier, but workers with a college degree on average earn about $450 more each week compared to those who don't. So unemployment rates are also about half of that as well for people who graduated college versus like having a high school diploma. So there's also a higher chance of getting a job, not only having a higher payer one. And so that's a pretty convincing reason to go to college. But the thing that I would caveat is that if you aren't 100% sure you're going to finish or you don't know exactly what you're going to do, then you might not want to do it. Because, I mean, the worst scenario that you can end up in is the worst of both worlds, where you haven't finished a degree, but you still have debt, you still wasted your time, you still have no credential to show for it, your dad thinks you're a loser or whatever, and you have no job at the end of it. You know what I mean? You're back to square one, essentially, with the high school grads. If you're considering college, you'll think like, I'm not the one who's going to drop out. But only about 41% of students actually graduate from college in 4 years. So you're really kind of rolling the dice unless you know exactly what you're going to do and you feel confident you're going to do it. It's a risky move for pretty much anybody.
Right. I think that's the thing is like, I would say, if you can afford it, if you have the time, if you're not taking out massive amounts of loans and you're smart about it, then yeah, college is worth it. I mean, like you just said, Nathan, there's a lot of benefits to it. And there's, I had a positive experience with it for the most part. I would just say, even here, it's like, even what we've been talking about, we're not even so much discussing whether or not it's worth it. It's more so the critique of the framework of which, of the options we are given in terms of college education, higher learning under capitalism, the way that it's been completely co-opted, privatized, and wielded against us, in ways that are detrimental to the people that it's supposed to be benefiting and the society that it's supposed to be benefiting, for that matter.
Yeah, you raise a good point. It's like, of course it's worth it because that's why it continues to exist in the market. You know, if it wasn't worth it, it would probably disappear. But because all these different little facets of society can benefit from it, it keeps itself going. You know what I mean? It's almost like holding your life hostage in front of you. And it's like, do you want to be successful or not? You know, here's a path you could take.
Right.
You know, it's just going to cost you a lot.
But I mean, ultimately, the market forces dictate whether something is profitable. And, you know, with the volatility of the market under capitalism and how it's sort of just like anarchy of production, you can't always say that a college degree is going to like matter or be worthwhile. I mean, in the next 50, 75 years, there'll be so much inflation with, you know, the amount of degrees out there. I feel like everyone will have one. And then therein lies the ultimate problem with like the education system and the university system under capitalism. When there is no real rigid standard for, you know, knowledge development or the value that society sets upon it, because the market is so unstable and is so just prone to fail based on, you know, other conditions like we've seen with COVID and different things like that. All the value that we instill in these things is kind of precarious. So with that, like, do you guys think that university education under capitalism can be reformed in the sense that that your degree holds real value or consistent static value to society?
I'm going to give an answer that's extremely similar to several episodes we've already recorded. Yes, it can be reformed. Like, if you're pinpointing one specific problem about capitalism, yes, like, of course, we can probably reform that specific part of the college experience and make it, you know, better for students or whatever. We can make interest lower, or we can make tuition better. We can put out more grants, whatever. Those are all solutions. But it seems like you're putting like a beaver dam in a great flowing river. You know what I mean? There's still this big market push, right? The river is capitalism. It's pushing college in this direction, and everything that we do against it is sort of always going to be just fighting against that current, you know? And that's, again, why it's like on a bigger picture. This is why we're discussing this specific thing on this podcast, is because it is something that we're trying to fight against. It is this idea of like, can we change the flow of the river? Can we reverse this fucking whole mess that we have going on and not be working against it? Can we have colleges that aren't working against market forces and that are just there for, I mean, God forbid there be a university there just for the public good, you know, for people who just want to learn things, you know? Like, can we ever get there? I don't know, but definitely not under sort of like small liberal, like means tested types of reforms.
Right. Or even a system where someone who just wants to take a class strictly for the intent of learning can do so and can not worry about it costing an arm and a leg. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the access, of course, that's huge. Yeah.
Right. Because that is a huge component to it. And it's like, I tend to agree with you. You know, of course we can reform this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, like, and you were kind of getting to this, Matt, as it's like, the current education system under capitalism, because specifically of the system of capitalism, like, you know, all market entities that it produces, because that's what the university is right now, a market entity, it's a bubble, you know, it's a bubble and it's waiting to pop. And that's kind of, you know, where we're at now is, when is this thing going to take a turn? You know, when is this bubble, this education bubble, going to pop? You know, could it be when, you know, there's some systemic change? I don't know. Could it be when people just realize that actually going out and getting a college education harms them more than it helps them? I don't know. But all the writing on the wall to me seems to be that college education, much like many other market entities before it, is largely a economic bubble.
Yeah. The way I look at it is just like the only thing that I could see reforming this system as it currently exists, and it wouldn't even really fix all the major problems because the underlying structure is so rotten. Like capitalism itself is so rotten. But the only thing that I could think of that would allow it to be reformed is the accessibility of it. Like, I just think that college should be free. I think that university programs should be 100% absolutely free, and they should be
Agreed.
based on performance. Like, if you have the drive and ability to succeed in the university programs and you can maintain, I don't know, let's say like a B or C average, I think you should be entitled to be able to go to school for free. And then, not that I want the market to continue, but I think like the market should test the ability of the candidate. Like, if they're a B or C student, like, let them compete with other people in interviews and things like that. I just think that as it exists right now under capitalism, it's a class stratifier, and the only way to reform it to make society at that apex more equitable is to just make it so free and accessible that it becomes a non-issue, that it just becomes like an externalization to where people can go through the process if they're able and they want to, and then they just use that to become more competitive. That would be the only reform that I could see working. But again, long term, like, my goal is not to keep the market in, like, under capitalism stable. You know what I mean? Like, and it's kind of just like one of these situations where it's like chicken or the egg. But as it exists right now, I don't think that it can be reformed, because, if you made everything free like that, who's going to finance it? And obviously the state, but the state would means test the shit out of it. And I just don't see the college and university system as it exists now existing without meritocratic bullshit and means testing.